Доброго вечора. Buenas tardes. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, dear community of Simon Bolivar National Journalism Prize. Miguel Cortés, President of Grupo Bolivar. Silvia Martinez de Narvaez, Director of the Simon Bolivar National Journalism Award. Dear members of the jury, I'm so happy to meet, and dear ladies and gentlemen, winners of the Simon Bolivar National Journalism Award. It's a great honor for me to be here and to speak to you, as my country and perhaps my life too serve as an example of why honest and high standard journalism matters. In the Soviet Union, in the country where I was born, everything related to the press, information or publishing was officially called mass information and propaganda. There was a Ministry of Mass Information and Propaganda. There were departments of mass information and propaganda in the universities and degrees in mass information and propaganda. And the media were referred as the means of mass information and propaganda, quite literally. And the term journalism was only used like informally, although it's really doubtful that what they had in the Soviet Union could be considered true journalism. When the man-made famine known as Holodomor, organized by Stalin and Soviet government, struck in 1932 and more than 4 million Ukrainians, 4 million people perished in just 1 year. No newspaper or radios reported on that. Even though it occurred on a huge, in terms of Europe, territory, the few voices that spoke up on this issue came from the West, from Europe, United States or Canada. Soviet media never brought this crime into the spotlight, never, ever. During the Second World War, the largest military disaster of the 20th century, when the Soviet army fought for the colonial expansionist interests of their country and occupied far more territories that were necessary for defense, Soviet media only spoke of heroic resistance and portrayed Soviet soldiers as the sole victors of Europe. Even today, there are people in Russia who not only believe that the Soviet Union defended Europe single-handed, but also are unaware of how many territories were
fueron incorporados por la fuerza al llamado campo socialista después, permaneciendo bajo control militar soviético durante décadas. Cuando comenzó la catástrofe
of the reactor at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant, no media reported it. Even the nearby cities were not evacuated promptly. Nobody knew, while hundreds of thousands of people were at risk of radiation exposure, the government and media remained silent. It was only 2 days after the explosion when the radiation level set off alarms at the Forsmark nuclear power plant in Sweden, over 1,000 kilometers away from Chernobyl plant, that the Soviet Union finally admitted the accident and began responding to it. And it took years and years of investigations by foreign experts and organizations to acknowledge the environmental and human harmful impact of the catastrophe and its long-term dangers. Still, people outside of the Soviet Union knew more about those than people within the country, who were primarily exposed to state-controlled mass information and propaganda. Russia inherited propaganda machine of the Soviet Union and adapted it to the modern era. While the official label of total propaganda was removed, it continues to operate investing significant resources in covering up murders, kidnappings, imprisonment, torture, rape, and territorial occupations. In the 21st century, Russia committed numerous military crimes in Georgia, Chechnya, Dagestan, Syria. And currently, Russia is waging a criminal and bloody war against my country, against Ukraine. Russia is targeting civilian infrastructure with bombs, destroying hospitals and schools, and subjecting farmers and workers from occupied territories to torture and execution. Since 2022, Russia has displaced around 20,000 children from the occupied territories, changed their names, and forced them into adoption by new Russian families. Furthermore, there have been more than 90,000 reports of sexually based crimes committed by Russian soldiers since the attempt of the full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022. What empowers us to fight, resist, and oppose an army from a country so much larger and richer is our courage, our solidarity, and belief in our values, and the support we receive. And this support is possible because the world is aware of the situation and of who is truly responsible for it. We hold on to the fact that Russia's crimes are being exposed, and the justice will prevail. As of May 16, 2023, at least 17 foreign journalists and media workers and over 30 Ukrainian journalists, photographers, and videographers have lost their lives while covering the Russian-Ukrainian war. I knew some of them personally, and they were courageous and dedicated professionals who aimed to reveal the truth and provide authentic information instead of the fake narrative of propaganda spread by Russia. Now, new people are working on the place of those who are gone, who were killed. And new people are doing the same and risking the same, risking their lives. In the age of social media, everyone shares information, like daily. Everyone has the opportunity to influence and shape narratives, but people's data is so fragile, and being focused on their own lives and their own businesses, they are so easy to manipulate. We know a lot about that in the example of the situation with Cambridge Analytica, and we also know that this is not easy to change. Professional journalism, led by strong ethical standards, is on guard of what we know about the world and how we perceive it. These ethical standards, at their highest level, require journalists to be honest, act in public interest, and minimize harm. Journalists have an obligation to seek out the truth and report it as accurately as possible, which involves diligently gathering and relevant facts for a story. And some give all, even their lives, for this cause. Journalists also must maintain their independence from external influences, be they political, commercial, or personal, to ensure that things are reported without interference, upholding the public's right to know the truth. Ethical standards in journalism are not just a matter of professional integrity, but a safeguard for the very principles of democracy. Journalists often serve as checks and balances in a democratic society. If they fail to uphold those standards I'm talking about, then the corruption and abuses of power can go unchecked and unreported, eroding the foundations of a just and fair society. These standards underpin our society's right to information, accountability, and informed citizenship. I'm grateful, I'm truly, truly grateful that my country can now rely on high-quality journalism from around the world to counter Russian propaganda. And I'm very grateful too and proud of you, of each of those who work hard day by day to make it possible. Thank you. Дякую.